you are tired of typing in browser vendor prefixes when using CSS, check out the Bourbon library. This includes several Sass, mixins, and functions to make it more convenient to work with CSS. Here, let me show you how to use it with Rails. So here's the application we'll be working with, and the design here could use quite a bit of work. So let me show you first how to add Bourbon to this project, and then how we can use some of its features to improve the design. To install Bourbon, just go to the application's gem file and add the Bourbon gem into there, and then run the bundle command to install the gem. And then to use Bourbon with the Rails asset pipeline, we'll need to change the way the default application CSS file works, because at the moment it's using a Sprockets manifest to load each of the other style sheet assets. And the problem with this is that Sprockets will compile each of the Sass files into CSS individually, which makes it difficult to share the Bourbon mixins across all of the Sass files. So to fix this, what we can do is just use Sass to load up all of the Sass files instead of Sprockets. To do that, just go into your application CSS file and add the .css SCSS extension to it so it becomes a Sass file. Next, you can just clear out the Sprockets manifest, because instead we want to use the import command that Sass provides to pull in the files that we want to include. And in here, for now, I'm just going to include the Bourbon file, which is provided by the gem. Now you may need to restart your Rails app for it to pick up the Bourbon gem, but once you do and you try reloading the page here, you can see that we lost all of our styling. And if I check out the asset/application.css file, you can see that it's blank. And this is because Bourbon doesn't include any CSS into your application directly. It just makes it more convenient for you to add CSS through Sass. So it's still up to us to write all of the CSS code for our project, so I'll include back the layout and projects files that I already had set up earlier, but the key is now we can use Bourbon inside of these files. So now when I reload the page, it brings us back to the design we had earlier. The first thing I want to do is set up a decent font for us here, because I'm just using the default font in the browser. Bourbon includes this font family add-on, which provides several variables for setting various types of fonts, and it has fallback fonts included automatically in them. So inside of the body section of my layout Sass file, I'll just set the font family here and set it to the Verdana variable that Bourbon provides. And now reloading the page, you can see that font changed using that handy little variable. Next, I would like to add a gradient to this header section. Well, Bourbon provides a linear gradient module, which you can include and pass in a couple of arguments to set the colors. It starts at the top, but you can change that as well here. So inside of the header section in my layout Sass file, I can just include the linear gradient and have it fade from a lighter gray to a darker gray. And because this automatically includes a default fallback background color, I don't need to include background color in here anymore. So reloading the page here, there's my gradient. Subtle but nice. Now let's say I want a drop shadow underneath this header section. Well, Bourbon provides a box shadow mixin, which you can use like the CSS3 property, but it generates all the vendor prefix variations for you. So back in the header, I'll just tell it to include the box shadow mixin, and say no offset, but with a 6-pixel shadow and a 3-pixel spread, and let's color it black. And then reload the page, and there's my shadow. Looks really nice. Next, I want to add some rounded corners to each of the project's sections here. And it should come as no surprise that Bourbon includes a border radius module, which will do just this. Now I'm going to do this inside of the project Sass file, which is where the project-specific styling goes. And inside of the project div, let's include the border radius, and let's set it to 6 pixels. And let's test this out, reloading the page, and there's the rounded corners on each of the project sections. Next thing I would like to do is change the way the background color changes when we hover over a project. Instead of changing immediately, I would like it to fade in to that background color. And we could do that with transitions in CSS3. You just provide the attribute you want to change, the time it takes to do the change, and then the easing effect. So I'll apply this to each project by including that transition mixin and have it affect all attributes over 500 milliseconds and ease in and out. Now when I try this out, the background will now fade in and out when I hover my mouse over various projects. Pretty cool. Now the last thing I would like to do is improve the look of this new project link. I'd like it to be a button instead. Bourbon includes this nice buttons add-on, which you can use to make different styles of buttons. They have a simple style, the pill style, and a shiny button style. And you could just pass in the style and color as arguments to it. Now I've already added a new project class to that anchor tag, so I'll just reference that here and then include the button into it. Now I'll just make it a simple button, and for the color, let's do a light green kind of color. Let's try that. So now watch this new project link as I reload this page, and there's my button. Now it did inherit some attributes of the anchor tag, such as the underline, so I want to remove that, and I also want the button to be a little bigger. So I'll set the text decoration to none, and also the font size, let's try 16 pixels. And then reload the page, and there we go. We now have a nice button for adding a new project. So now that this page is looking nicer, let's take a look at the assets application CSS file to see what Bourbon is generating for us. We'll just check out all of the vendor prefix properties that we didn't have to mess with for creating the gradient, the box shadow, all the transition properties here, and even all the properties used for creating that new project button. Just so much code here that we just didn't have to mess with thanks to Bourbon. Now I'd also like to point out that Sass also includes several functions that can help out in generating CSS, a lot of dealing with color changes and variations and adjustments. Check out episode 268 for more information on what you get with Sass alone. Well, that's it for this episode on Bourbon. It's a great way to generate CSS without having to worry about all those browser vendor prefixes. Thanks for watching. In the Pro episode this week, I show you how to do A/B testing using the split gem. This allows you to experiment with various designs and track them so you can see which one is most effective in your application. To watch that episode and all other Pro and Revised episodes, just head on over to railscast.com/pro and then sign up there for just $9 per month.